What's up, guys? Welcome back to Red&Gold. Today I'm joined by a very special guest once again. He's been on the channel before, Ben Meyerson. How you doing today, Ben?
I'm doing well. My Florida State Seminoles has been having a few losses lately, so that is what it is. But hey, things are looking up for the Niners right now. I've been enjoying watching them play football lately. I'm interested to see how the rest of the season goes. Because this is a nice little 3-game win streak, but yeah, things are up and down all the time. Just this time 3 weeks ago, we thought the world was ending and Kyle Shanahan was going to get fired and traded this player, that player, and now everything's all hunky dory, and we're in the sixth position in the wild card. So it's just funny how things flip really quick. But yeah, I'm having a good time. I'm enjoying my football for sure.
Yeah, I remember like 3 weeks ago when we lost to the Cardinals. I was like, I just hope we can win a game. I just hope we can win another game. Like playoffs. You want to talk about playoffs?
Playoffs.
I just hope we can win another game. But without further ado, let's jump right into it. Starting off, you've already seen the title of the video. Should Deebo Samuel win Offensive Player of the Year?
Should he? Yes. I don't think he will though. But I think out of all the players in the NFL, and you're going to see it this weekend and potentially the weekend after against Cincinnati, there's no bigger offensive player that makes an impact like Deebo Samuel does, at least outside the quarterback position. I think for the 49ers, he's really been their entire offense every single game this year. Even when their offense isn't rolling, Deebo Samuel is. And I feel like that's the mark of the best offensive player, right? A player who's going to get his and be producing for the team despite all the circumstances around him. And I feel like that's what Deebo Samuel has done. And if anything, he's being held back by other players around him, right? Jimmy Garoppolo just can't push the ball downfield like you'd like him to. So Deebo Samuel has to be in this other role where he has to play more gadget, right? He has to play running back, which I do love seeing him at running back. But if I'm being honest, I think the perfect mix for Deebo is kind of like 4, 5, 6 carries at running back. And then you want him being a receiver downfield because that's what he's very good at. And he's really great when you get him open in space. And you see Kyle, he's able to produce these routes where players are just wide open and they can run for days, right? They can do more of that with Deebo Samuel if they had the right quarterback, but they just don't. So unfortunately, they kind of have to manufacture yards for him, and he's still doing it, right? So I think Deebo Samuel should win Offensive Player of the Year, but I think unfortunately Jonathan Taylor or Cooper Kupp will win it. And really, with Deebo missing these 2 games or just even 1 game, it's just going to be too tough, I think, because the race is so close. It'd be different if he had a far lead ahead of him and he came back and their offense was really bad when he wasn't there, and then their offense, was flying when he was there. But unfortunately, I think the race is so tight at the top between those 3 guys that Deebo missing this time is just gonna slip away from him a little bit.
Yep. Now, I do think Deebo Samuel should win Offensive Player of the Year because he makes such a huge impact, especially on the Niners offense for the Niners. He definitely has a huge impact for the Niners. But do I think he will win Offensive Player of the Year? No, because like you said, there are other guys like Jonathan Taylor who are just dominating also. And with Deebo Samuel missing time that he's expected to miss 1 or 2 weeks with his injury, with his groin injury. That's definitely going to hurt him in that Offensive Player of the Year race. But I feel like with the Niners, no other player, no even Jonathan Taylor. You take Jonathan Taylor away from the Colts, obviously it wouldn't be as good as an offense, but the Colts will still have the Colts will still be able to function on offense. So without Deebo Samuel, the Niners have already had their struggles on offense in the beginning of the season. But whenever Deebo Samuel, he never struggled this whole entire season. Deebo Samuel was that one bright spot that always, whatever might have been, whatever, if Jimmy Garoppolo threw an interception or the offense just wasn't scoring points, it would be Deebo Samuel making plays, getting a little screen pass, running for like 80 yards, 60, 70 yards, scoring touchdowns in the backfield, like as a running back. So Deebo Samuel's been a huge bright spot for the Niners this season. And I feel like no other player, even Jonathan Taylor, doesn't make as big of an impact for his team like Deebo Samuel does for the Niners.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly the right argument there, and I think you're not I'm not going to disagree with you. And with Debo this year, it's just been so impressive how consistently he's done it, right? Because we've seen these flashes from Debo before. We've seen him had good games. Seen him have really good halves. We've seen him play excellent against certain matchups. But to do this game after game, despite the circumstances, I'm amazed. I'm blown away. And I think even the most optimistic Debo Samuel fans are sitting here right now like, wow, this is very impressive. So I think he's been the MVP for the 49ers so far. If they didn't have him, I would really question how many games they would have won. Now I still think they're a good team, like a 4 or 5 win team, but Deebo Samuel is legitimately worth 1 to 2 to maybe even 3 years or 3 wins this year. So he should be in contention for offensive play of the year. I think he should win it, but just unfortunately, with the way the league goes, he won't. But he's certainly the 49ers MVP this year. He's their most valuable offensive player that they've had, gosh, in like 20 years maybe. It's really amazing what Deebo Samuel's been able to do on this 49ers team this year. I mean, he's breaking all kinds of records already, and we're only like 12, 13 weeks into the season. So still got time left. And I think he's going to keep putting this together once he is back healthy.
Yep, and also I forgot to mention Deebo Samuel wasn't he like the first player in NFL history to have over 1,000 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns, and 5 rushing touchdowns.
Yep. First
So
ever.
yeah, first ever. So that also should help his case. But like you said, him missing time the next 2 games, or possibly one game. Hopefully it's one game, but if he does miss 2 games, that's definitely gonna
Yeah.
hurt him in this race. So
Well,
that
and think about guys like Cooper Kupp and Jonathan Taylor, right? Cooper
yeah,
Kupp early in the season was getting so much buzz. He was the number one fantasy wide receiver. He's tailed off a little, even though he's still producing a lot. But then a guy like Jonathan Taylor, right? Those guys, he had that 5 touchdown game. Those two guys have had signature moments where not just fans of their team recognize how great those players are, and people are
yeah.
just like, wow, and amazed. And I feel like that's the one thing that hasn't quite happened for Debo, even
Mm-hmm.
though he's looked really good on national stages and everything, right? He just doesn't have that signature moment that I think Kupp or Jonathan Taylor have had this year. And with Taylor, right, if he has like another 3, 4 touchdown game, you got to just give it to him. I
Yeah.
think so. With how much he's been producing for that team, like you said, they could play Marlon Mack, they could play some of their other running backs and still get some good production. But yeah, a guy like Jonathan Taylor, he's doing so much. You can't not recognize that. So I think he's going to be the guy. I really do.
Yep. I mean, yeah, you said also Debo Samuel. I don't know if he's necessarily had that one game where everybody's like, "Oh, Debo Samuel, look at Debo Samuel,"
Right.
right? Where you look at John Taylor 5 touchdown game, you look at Cooper Cup, obviously number one fantasy receiver. I have him on my fantasy team at FY, dominating for me, puts up like 20 points per week, just straight up a baller. But like yeah, like you said, Debo Samuel hasn't had that game where everybody's like, "Whoa," or hasn't
Yeah.
had that moment where you're like, you know what, Debo Samuel. Like I even hear now, like people would still take DK Metcalf or AJ Brown over Debo Samuel. And like when I was one of those people. I don't know if you were one of those people, but I was one of those people coming into last year and the year before that. I was like, Debo just gets hurt. I get it, he has 1 or 2 good games, but Debo just gets hurt way too much. When I see guys like DK and AJ Brown putting up 100 yard games and like mossing receivers, I mean mossing DBs, I'm just like Debo's just sitting. Debo just gets injured. He's not on the field. So, but now we understand why Kyle kind of drafted Debo, and like I feel like with Debo Samuel, if he does have that one game where he has that moment or he has that game, I feel like people will start to give him more credit. And he's also super underrated because he just hasn't had that game.
Yeah, and I feel like honestly that's going to happen during the playoffs. I think that first wild card game, if the 49ers make it, right? Because I just don't think they'll probably go beyond that wild card game, even though they could win it, right? But he's going to have everyone, every single football fan watching Deebo Samuel and watching that offense and realizing how much of this is because of him. And I really feel like he is going to have that moment at some point here soon, and he'll get that recognition. But like we've been talking about, some of these other guys have just been doing it all season at that level, where
Yeah.
they have the production, they have the storyline, they have the narrative, and the big game to go along with it. To me, it's a two-man race right now, and Deebo Samuel is in it.
Yeah. Like I mean, look at George Kittle, right? Like George Kittle has amazing blocks, has some games when he was like coming when he had that breakout year, had like some 200 yard games. One game I think he had like 200, 190 something yards in the first half, right? Like George Kittle had those type of games. I mean, I'm not gonna take anything away from George Kittle, but like he had those type of games, and everybody's like, look at George Kittle, top three best tight end in football, da 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 da, because he's
You
had
get
that.
you get a certain level of recognition when you have
Yeah,
those games, right?
yeah,
People, the more casual fan will start to come around to the idea that, oh my gosh, this is one of the best players in football. And for us 49ers fan, you know what? For now, let's just enjoy Debo. Let the rest of the league catch up to him. Because if you aren't loving Debo Samuel, that's on you.
yeah. Well, moving on to the next topic. Who is the 49ers' biggest threat in the NFC wildcard race?
I still think it's the Los Angeles Rams, even though I don't really believe in that team. And the reason I say that is because I just don't think they can be this bad for this long. I know Matthew Stafford has been making the mistakes he's making, but Sean McVay is too good of a coach to not figure this out. And I believe in him more than anything. And I really think, the turnover that they had on their roster around the trade deadline, losing Robert Woods, everything that happened was kind of the perfect storm in the worst way for the Rams, right? So down the stretch at the end of the season, if they need to be heading in the right direction first of all, but they are headed in the right direction. If they do have some positive momentum and get on a hot streak, out of all the rest of the wild card teams, they're the team I'm most afraid of for sure. I would have said Philly probably a week ago, but then we saw what just happened to Philly against New York. So
Yeah.
I think there's the wild card race is going to be crazy. And honestly, I don't think any of the wild card teams are really that good. I don't. But with the Rams, it could come down to some seeding issues with the 49ers and them, right? They play week 18. So I think it's going to be a situation where maybe the 49ers have one win less than them. Maybe it's close, and that game is really going to matter. So I feel like the Rams are that number one team that you really worry about. And in terms of teams below them knocking them out, I don't believe in Carolina necessarily. Two teams I love, though, are Philly and Washington. Washington because of the schedule. And I just think the rest of the season is going to play out for them, hopefully right. And then Philly, because I
Yeah,
think that's a really good team. And again, easy record. So I think, 49ers aren't positioned badly. But if there's any team that you're really like, oh gosh, this is going to be annoying, it's going to be the Rams. I still think they have the most high-end upside out of any of those teams left. I just don't think the NFC or honestly the NFL is as good this year. It just isn't top to bottom. It's just worse overall. I don't think there's no true team that is the number one team right now, even though I will say I personally I would be betting on the Arizona Cardinals right now because Kyler Murray hasn't been healthy and they're still the number one seed and they still look good without him. And they're about to get back to DeAndre Hopkins. Like, if there's any team who I think is going to win the NFC, if I had to pick one today, I'd pick Arizona. Especially with that home field advantage. You don't have to go to Green Bay and play Aaron Rodgers in the snow. But yeah, the NFC just isn't good overall. I mean, this year it's just so weak. There's no true team that has really broke out at this point in the season.
Yeah, even in the AFC, like there's not a team in the NFL right now that I can say, you know what, this team has the best chance to win the Super Bowl. This team is a clear cut best.
I
team.
feel worse about the AFC than I do the NFC.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, obviously the Rams is the obvious choice, but the Rams have been on a downward spiral. They've lost like 4 straight. I mean, that Matt Von Miller code has not aged well. I went to sleep 4-4 and woke up 7-1 since acquiring Von Miller. They're 0-3. I don't know if you saw, but on Twitter, in the month of November, the Lions were 0-2-1, and the Rams are 0-3. So the Lions have a better record.
Seahawks joined them too, 0-3 as well. So hey, 2 0-3 teams from the division. That's certainly. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, right? Is that this time 3 weeks ago or 3 games ago, we just think so differently about these teams. So we have 6 games left, right? I'm not ready to overreact yet one way or the other, especially with a team like Los Angeles, who's as talented as they are, right? They're going to figure out something at some point. They're not going to keep losing games like this, but it's just a matter of how good they are and if they can get on a hot streak. And I feel like that's what this wild card race is going to come down to. Who's hot at the end of the season? I feel like that's what it always is.
I remember a couple of weeks ago when they beat like a month ago or two when they beat the Buccaneers. Some people calling them the best team in the entire NFC because they beat
Yeah.
the Bucks, right? So at one time, the Rams were considered the best team without Von Miller, without OBJ, without those two additions. They're considered the Super Bowl favorites and the best team because they beat the Bucks.
Yeah, and
But
now people are saying they won't make the
yeah,
playoffs, right? It's
yeah,
just how things go. It's just how
yep.
things go sometimes.
Well, I think the biggest threat to the Niners is the Eagles. The Eagles, I get it. They lost to the Giants. It was a bad performance by Jalen Hurts. But the Eagles have such an easy schedule. They have the Giants, they have the Jets, they have Washington, right? So they have an easy schedule. Now, also Washington, like you mentioned, because Washington also has an easy schedule.
It's
For
the
both of
same
those
thing.
teams,
They play each other twice. I
yeah,
mean, so
yeah,
I feel
whoever,
like to me, if someone gets that sweep, I feel like you're a shoo-in really for that
yeah,
last wild card spot.
yeah, it's either between those two teams for me. I think the Rams are going to get a wild card spot. I don't think they have a pretty easy schedule down the road. I mean, Jacksonville, Minnesota, which is I get it. Minnesota has been pretty good. They beat Green Bay, but Minnesota is a good team, but I think the Rams can get it done against Minnesota. But I'm saying either Philly or Washington because they do have easy schedules. So I think it's going to be one of those two teams. And not to mention the Niners also have not an easy. The Niners don't have an easy road like Seattle. They give us a tough fight pretty much all the time. Then you have to go play Tennessee. Who knows what that game is going to be like? It's a short week. You have to play in Tennessee. Then you have to go play the Bengals the week after, and the Bengals don't sleep on the Bengals. The Bengals are a good team. Joe Burrow has been playing pretty darn good this season. I remember I was one of those people that criticized him last season, but he's been pretty darn good this season. Do not sleep on the Bengals. They have great receivers. The run game, the
Mm-mm.
defense has been playing well for them. So the Niners have a tough schedule. For the Niners, they have to win those games that are 50-50, like Seattle,
Yeah.
like the Bengals. They have to win it, and they have to capitalize on those 50-50 games.
Uh,
Because if they don't, the Eagles and the Washington football team could be the sixth seed, and they could both of those teams could sneak into the wild card because they just have an easier schedule.
I will say for the 49ers right now, they own the tiebreakers over Minnesota, Philadelphia, obviously with the head-to-head wins over them. And then if they can, even if they lose to the Rams, they could still own the tiebreaker over them because they already beat them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So things could get really interesting. And I will say the NFC in terms of the seeding, it is favoring the Niners now in terms of that. Like I said, they own those tiebreakers. They're just positioned well to if they keep doing what they've been doing, they can really be in a good spot heading into the playoffs. I think
Yeah.
they can get that first wild card spot. That's to me is the really interesting race here at the end. Who gets that? Is it the Rams or is it the 49ers? Because the Rams do have a tougher schedule.
Mm-hmm.
They have Jacksonville, which is kind of a dud game, but the rest of their games are by no means, easy wins. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Going to be an interesting wild card race.
Yep, it definitely will. I mean, I would prefer the Niners to be 5th seed because I think we could beat the Cowboys. I would not want to play Brady if we sit at the 6th seed. I would not want to play Brady in the wild card round. That's most likely to end up well. So I would rather be the 5th seed. But moving on to the next topic. Speaking of playoffs and potential Super Bowl, I've heard fans on Twitter say it. Shout out to Grant. Grant also said it. He said the Niners should start Trey Lance for the rest of the season. Because most people's argument, not even just Grant, but most people's argument, and obviously because we've seen Jimmy, he couldn't win the Super Bowl 2 years ago. So do you agree with that statement or that narrative of that Trey Lance should start because Jimmy Garoppolo can't win Super Bowls? We saw it in 2019.
I want you to answer this first, Amin, actually. I know exactly what I want to say, but I want to hear what you have to say.
No, I don't think Trey Lance should start for the rest of the season.
Okay, let's talk
I
through
think
it. Let's
I
keep
do
going.
if Trey Lance started from the beginning of the season. Yes, I wouldn't mind if Trey Lance started. If he started from the beginning of the season, then obviously Trey Lance would be the starter. But he didn't, unless he played after the Arizona game. If he didn't have the injury and he continued to be the starter after the Arizona game, then yes, I could. Trey Lance should be the starter for the rest of the season. But since he didn't, and since Jimmy's now the start, Jimmy's been the starter pretty much for the majority of the year. I feel like Jimmy didn't win the Super Bowl. He choked, but that's on other reasons because of Kyle, also because of the defense. But the way I look at it is that Jimmy Garoppolo, number one, he can run the offense better. He's better. He's better at the reads, at the progressions. He's better at what's it called. He's better at reading the defense. So those are some of the things I can point out for Jimmy. And then also with Lance, he's obviously mobile. He has a better arm. But my issue with playing Lance for the rest of the season is that Lance just hasn't played. It's like, why are we throwing a rookie out there and then putting him in the playoff situation? Let's say the Niners do make the playoffs and we're trying to put him in a playoff situation, and you expect him to do better than Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo has that experience. Where with Trey Lance, he just hasn't had the experience because he hasn't played yet. He's only played one full game in the NFL so far. So playing Trey Lance in these crucial games for the rest of the season, he could win those, which would be great. But at the same time, he could also lose and he could drop us out of playoff contention. But let's say he does win some and we make it to the playoffs. Why put that young rookie in that pressure situation in the playoffs? Or with Jimmy Garoppolo, yes, Jimmy Garoppolo, he has his flaws, but Jimmy Garoppolo just has that experience. He's been there before. And with the Niners are a run first team, and Jimmy Garoppolo just makes enough throws and does enough every week for the last couple of weeks for us to win, and he has that experience. So I'm leaning a little bit towards Jimmy Garoppolo.
I think you kind of nailed it there at the end where you said the 49ers are a run first team. And that's why they should start Trey Lance, right? Because they are handing the ball off 40 times per game right now. They're throwing the ball about 36% of the time per game. It's almost a third of it. Look, it's not that I understand the downside of starting Trey Lance, and honestly, that's what would keep me from doing this move. But what I will say about this is the reason I've been wanting to do this move forever, and I still think they could at any point in the season. I just don't think this will happen this way. But if they played him, I think with Jimmy Garoppolo, right, you get all of the turnover worthy plays, all the risks that he takes, but then along with that, you don't get any upside, right? He doesn't push the ball downfield. He doesn't take risks downfield. So when you have a quarterback who plays like that, it just limits your offense. And there's some throws, especially Jimmy was making, that he's still making rookie mistakes. That's the problem I have with Jimmy Garoppolo, is that you can't be this veteran guy, who's this efficient guy, and make the mistakes that Trey Lance would be making, right? So the reason the 49ers should start Trey Lance is because they're going to get all of the downside of Jimmy Garoppolo with the potential upside of Trey Lance. And I think that's why I would be inclined to start him right now. But it's a lot more complicated than that. I think because of locker room dynamics and things like that, you just can't start Trey Lance right now. It's not going to happen. I don't expect it to happen. In fact, I'll put a 0% chance on it happening, barring injury. But if we're talking about 49ers winning, you can't tell me that Jimmy Garoppolo gives them a better chance to win. I just don't believe that anymore. And I think if you look at the past 3 weeks in particular, they've just taken the ball out of his hands. They don't trust him. They trust him to do enough, but they don't challenge him beyond that. And they don't want him to do more, because when you ask him to do more, you get all of those rookie mistakes, right, that you would see with the Trey Lance. But then Trey Lance, you're going to get big explosive plays with Trey Lance. And guess what? I see in the comments, Tom Brady throws picks too. He also throws the ball more than 15 yards downfield and can throw outs and can throw comebacks and can throw goes. Jimmy Garoppolo just doesn't do these things. That's a problem with him, is if he was making all the mistakes that he was making and he was pushing the ball downfield, I wouldn't have as big as a problem that I have right now. But he makes the same mistakes that a rookie Trey Lance would make. So you can't tell me that they would be worse off with Trey Lance starting. I'm just never going to believe that, because if they stick to this game plan, and if they call the game similar for Trey Lance, they run the ball 42 times per game. Give it to Elijah Mitchell, by the way, who barely played when Trey Lance played against Arizona. He also didn't have George Kittle. Those two guys probably seem important to the run game, right? I just think that if we saw the 49ers start Trey Lance right now and fully commit to him, it wouldn't go worse than it's going with Jimmy. And I genuinely believe there's no evidence to show that they wouldn't have the same record. And because of that, I think you kind of have to start Trey Lance. But again, this isn't going to happen. This just won't happen. Things are going to stay how they are, right? But if I had it my way, Trey Lance would be playing week 1. He'd be playing right now. I just don't understand this argument anymore. I think they're fine rolling with Jimmy towards the end of the season. Like, I get it. I understand why they're doing it, but terms of them actually winning and potentially trying to win a Super Bowl, I'm all in on Trey Lance.
I mean, I don't think you'll win a Super Bowl with Jimmy. I don't think that's gonna happen, right? But I also like. There's never been one rookie quarterback that's won a Super Bowl. So you also have that side of the argument that there's
No,
never been a
but
rookie that's ever won a Super Bowl.
and if you want an example of the model to follow, let's talk about Lamar Jackson, who played the last 6-7 games of his rookie season, right? Because the Ravens benched Joe Flacco because they needed that kind of injection into their offense. And yeah, they didn't go and win the Super Bowl that year, but guess what? He got those starts under his belt. He played in the playoffs, and then by the time he came back around, he was much more prepared because of that. So that's the advantage of playing Trey Lance, right? It's not because you think he's going to win the Super Bowl this year. It's that you're not going to win the Super Bowl this year anyways. So what are we doing, right? If you start Trey Lance and he gets that
Boosting Jimmy
playoff
Garoppolo's trade value.
right, boosting Jimmy's trade value, of course. But if you do start Trey Lance and he is the guy who you think he is, shouldn't be any problems. In fact, I think it's only going to be beneficial for Trey Lance if he does get that early playoff experience.
But at the end of the day, we all know the Niners aren't signing Jimmy Trey Lance. Unless Jimmy Garoppolo like tears his
No, they're not
ACL,
going to do it.
gets injured brutally, they're not starting Trey Lance whatsoever. Unless
No
he's
way.
needed to play, they're not doing it. They're just not. And otherwise, we would have seen it week 2, week 3, because the offense is struggling against the Packers. The offense is struggling against the Eagles, missing throws. But they're not playing Trey Lance for the rest of the season. But I understand that side of the argument too, because for some, I had this argument with my uncle yesterday. I was like, I asked him this question also yesterday. He was like, I'm like, well, he brought up Mac Jones. He's like, Mac Jones is doing well because Mac Jones is smart and he's accurate. And then at the same time, I was like, yeah, but Mac Jones is in a perfect situation. You put Mac Jones with his smartness and his accuracy, and you put him on the Jacksonville Jaguars, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But since he is in New England with the best defense in football right now, in third in pass, and best defense in football right now, with a great coach, probably the best coach in football in Bill Belichick, and with a great offensive line, you have pretty decent receivers in Kendrick Bourne and Nelson Aguilar and Hunter Henry and Johnny Smith. So he has weapons, he has an offensive line, he has a defense. Not to mention he also has a run game, right? So Mac Jones is everything he needs to succeed. Or with Trey Lance, I understand that point of view also, but my biggest thing with playoffs also is that I just don't know if I don't know if Trey Lance has that experience. And I feel like experience matters. That's just me. I feel like experience matters in a way. That's just for me, but I understand where you're coming from. But I just feel like when it comes to playoffs and with these last 6 games, because it is crucial, because I really don't want the Niners to miss out on the playoffs. And then we look at next year, and then off season's just boring. I hate the off season, especially with the Niners don't have any first round picks. They don't have that much cap space, so it's like, what's there to really look forward to in the off season? Unless the Niners make like this huge splashy move, where like, oh, then the Niners made this move. I did not see that coming. But unless they do something like that, the off season is not something I'm really looking forward to. So at the end of the day, I just want the Niners to make the playoffs. But I think Jimmy's going to be the starter for the season, and I feel like
No
if we
question.
do make the playoffs, the only reason I'm saying Jimmy over Trey right now is because Jimmy has that experience. Even though he does make the same mistakes, I just feel like he has that experience, and I feel like experience matters, especially when it comes to the playoffs. So I'm leaning a little bit towards Jimmy Garoppolo right now.
Yeah, and that's understandable. I'm right there with you. I hear you.
Well, moving on to the next topic, Deontay Lenore or Josh Norman? Who should be the Niners starting cornerback? Because I'm honestly one of those people that want Lenore to start, and I'm honestly frustrated with Josh Norman. But I want to get your thoughts on this.
Well, first of all, I just think that I just don't think they want Lenore to start at outside corner. That's the issue. They clearly have him envisioned for that nickel role. He's going to be playing slot, right? So unless K1 gets hurt, they're just not going to play him much. I don't necessarily agree with that, but it's just where this team is going. So I think you have to stick with Josh Norman. And he really hasn't been playing that bad. In fact, the secondary, I think, is playing much better than people give it credit for. The problem to me with the 49ers defense is not their corner play, because I think their corners are playing well enough to what we should expect of them, considering who they are. The problem now is that they have the 4th highest paid defensive line, and they're not getting that type of production out of them, right? They're paying to have a top 5 defensive line. They just don't have it. So when you aren't able to get the pressure that they were getting before, when you aren't creating havoc like they were in 2019, and you're paying to create that havoc, that's the issue for me. Considering who they have at corner, they're fine. I really don't have an issue with what's going on. I mean, I think they should certainly invest differently, but if take it aside from that, just look at the players for who they are. Josh Norman's playing good football for who he is. Yeah, he has some penalties, but he's forcing fumble. He's aggressive. He tackles well. I think he gets a bit of a bad rap, but like getting back to Lenore versus Josh Norman, it's just to me, I think you know I like Lenore a lot. I would prefer to see him at outside corner. Again, that's just not what the 49ers are going to be doing. They want him at that nickel slot. They want him playing slot. And I don't think Josh Norman's coverage has sucked recently. I think it was really bad early on in the season. But for who Josh Norman is, the 49ers are getting good production out of him, considering that he's at the end of his career. Like, I just don't have high expectations for him, and considering all we've seen from him, yeah, I mean, he's a lot better than like your Drake Kirkpatrick, Sorrell, all that. But even then, there are not that many good starting corners in the NFL. There are not 64 starting worthy corners in the NFL, unfortunately. So this is what you do when you don't invest in corners the way you should. You kind of have to go to the scrap heap, and considering that Josh Norman is from the scrap heap, I've been very impressed with what they've gotten. I mean, his coverage isn't great there, baller.
That's
But
that's that's. I'm surprised you're saying all this because I thought you were gonna be on the Lenore train, like me and Baller are.
no,
The Lenore
well,
train.
with Lenore again, I would play it differently, but that's just not how the Niners are playing it, right? They want him to be their K'Wan Williams of the future. So unless K'Wan gets hurt, which very well could happen because he's had an injury history before, they're just going to play Lenore at that spot next year. And that's what's happening with Lenore, even though I do like him, So the question to me is really, would they start Norman or a guy like Ambry Thomas? And I can tell you, I saw Ambry Thomas against Jacksonville. I was not impressed by Ambry Thomas at all.
No, we're not talking about Ambry Thomas.
No,
Ambry Thomas,
no.
no way.
But if they were replacing Josh Norman for a corner, we're talking about Ambry Thomas or your Dante Johnsons of the world, right? So, and I just saw, I think, breaking news that Adrian Peterson has officially signed with the Seahawks. So that should make that game a little more interesting. I mean, I don't think AP has anything left. It'll add like a storyline to it. But yeah, I see Barry Baller. No, not Ambry Thomas. Ambry Thomas is not good, man. And that's kind of the thing that with the 49ers, right? Is I'm not saying I love Josh Norman, but let's consider their other options and let's be real. Like I think coverage is hard to play in the NFL. I really don't think Norman's playing that bad for who he is, right? We shouldn't have as high expectations for a guy that the 49ers signs September, right? We're talking about a player. It'd be like them signing Devin Funchess, right? And then being like, oh man, Devin Funchess sucks. Look at it. It's like, no, man, there's a reason that they had to sign a guy like that, right? It's because they were in such a bad position. So considering who Josh Norman is, yes, I'm satisfied with what he's done. I think he is fine. I don't think he's the problem with what's going on right now because the 49ers aren't giving a lot in terms of coverage either. Their coverage has been better. It's been much better than it was early in the season. I think Josh Norman was really bad in the first 8 weeks. I think since it hasn't been as bad. And I'm not saying Josh Norman is good or they should bring him back or anything like that, but come on, like there's much worse corner play around the league, and I think people need to get around to that, right? People love to hate on the 49ers offensive line. I mean, they'll point out 1 or 2 plays a game. They'll say, "Oh, Daniel Brunskill is horrible. Michael Ritchie is awful."
Number 69.
The thing is, I mean, is that and look, they've looked fine without McGlinchey, right? But ultimately, the 49ers have probably one of the best top 10 offensive lines in the league. And that's because there's so much bad offensive line play, like so much. So I think when you look across the league and compare 49ers situation to other situations, do you want Josh Norman as your starting corner? Hell no. But I also don't want any of Seattle's starting corners, right? I don't want any of Jacksonville's starting corners, right? So I just don't think corner play across the league is doing well right now. And unless you invest one of those top picks in that guy, you just can't expect to get much, right? So for them to have Emmanuel Mosley, who's looking awesome, right, is a mid-tier guy, perfect. I think he's an awesome number 2 corner. You just don't have that true number 1 guy. If they had Jason Verrett all year, Like, this secondary would be incredible. But I really think people get so worked up because you're always watching the 49ers. You have to realize corner play across the league, like 64 starting corners, Josh Norman isn't one of the bottom 15%. Like, I'm not saying he's good, but he's certainly not as bad as people think he is when you consider what the rest of the options are.
Lenore should be starting over Norman. I don't even know why. I never thought those words would come out of your mouth. Like, I thought you were on the Lenore train. But, like, Norman, no, I understand you, Norman. He's not, we didn't expect Norman to be a lockdown or shutdown corner. I didn't expect that from Norman. But Norman sucks so bad at coverage. He's not a good tackler. He gets called for PI and holding every darn drive. You get holding, PI, number 26, number 26. You hear his name getting called by the refs at least 2 or 3 times. I know you're looking for
Not as much. No, not as much recently. I mean, honestly, though, that's been the thing at the beginning.
He got beat on a tackle by Alexander Madison for a touchdown. Okay, like, he's not good at coverage. He's not good at tackling. He gets called for penalties. The only one bright side, he's good in those stopping the run, and he's also good at forcing fumbles, which I think he's leading all corners in, which is forced fumbles. But he's not good at coverage. He's just not. And if he's not good at coverage, why not give Lenore a chance? I don't think they're gonna give Lenore a chance. But if I was running the team, I'm on the Lenore train because Norman is just so bad at coverage. He misses tackles. He gets called for PI, holding, whatever it is, twice a game plus every single game. Look it up. He just does. I watched the game twice.
Yeah, I mean, he's got called for 2 penalties in the last 3 games. Like, I think at the beginning of the season, it was as bad as you were saying it is. I think recently, because of game flow, because things have gone the way they have, Josh Norman is not as bad as people give him crap for. Look, he is not like a starting worthy corner. I don't think he is. I'm not trying to defend him in that way, but I don't know how many starting worthy corners there are in the league. I don't even know if there's 32, and there should be 64. So, like, when we're talking about it that way, and you have to understand how the rest of the league is right now, the situation isn't as bad as people think, considering what 49ers had to do. Now, like, you can quibble with who they should have signed, who they should have drafted. Yeah, I'll go on for days about Asante Samuel Jr. We could talk about that, right? But ultimately, considering the players they have and the way, like, things went down, this Josh Norman situation, he's not the problem with the 49ers. And honestly, he's not the coverage problem recently. He just hasn't been recently. You can't point to the last 3 games and blame him for anything that's happened. He just, like, yeah, he had 2 penalties against the Vikings, I think. But, I mean, in the 2 games before that, he didn't have any. So, yeah, does Josh Norman, is Josh Norman, like, awesome? No, but
he's coverage. He's just not good at coverage, right? And we're not talking the rest of the league. We know what Josh Norman is. I didn't expect him to be that great, right? But when we're specifically talking about the Lenore and the Norman, I feel like Lenore was strong in the beginning.
No, with Lenore, like, I understand the frustration with them not playing him there. But again, that's just not the spot they want to play Lenore at. They don't want him at outside corner. They want Ambry Thomas there.
Yeah,
or they want Dante Johnson. So.
I understand that. But if I'm just saying, like, would I rather start Lenore or Norman? I would rather start Lenore. That's just me because I just, like I mentioned before, with all of Norman's issues, I knew what we were gonna get by getting when we signed him, Norman. But at the same time, what I saw from Lenore in the beginning of the season, how he was getting better game by game. He was a great tackler. He wasn't bad in coverage. You saw a lot.
It's a shame that he's not playing, but they just unfortunately don't have the spot for him to play. So it is what it is.
You saw things that you like from Lenore in the beginning of the season.
For sure, no question.
Yeah, but and I would not, and if it was Norman or Ambry Thomas, I would definitely start Norman over Ambry Thomas. That's not even a question. But we have some questions in the chat that we missed. Just Angle says, "What do you guys think the Niners will get for Jimmy G?"
I think a third. That's where I'm at. That's where I feel like the Vegas zone is. It's between a second and third round pick, something like that.
I would say third or fourth round pick. I mean, for me, I don't know if this. I know this is kind of weird. I think this is like one of those things where not that many people would say it. But I would rather have the Niners get like a third or fourth round pick, or like even a fifth round pick, than them get like a second round pick. Because the Niners just can't draft early. And I'm like, and I understand for many people there's like that's stupidity, but like The
No,
Niners
I know,
just can't
I
draft
know
early.
where you're coming from. I mean, they could have just completely pissed away their day two last year, and they could have not made a single pick in day two of the draft. I mean, and it wouldn't have made a difference for their team this
Yeah,
year.
like it's just not. It's just one of those things where the Niners are so much better at drafting later round picks that like anytime we get a trade for picks and we trade a
Yeah,
player for
yeah.
picks,
Don't give
it's like
us a
why couldn't
second. Give us 2 4th-round picks.
give us two fourth round picks exactly? Like why couldn't we get like trade DeForest Buckner for like three fourth round picks, a fifth round pick? I would be happy because I know we would get at least some sort of value than us drafting torn ACL Javon Kinlaw with your first round
Yeah.
pick because it just the Niners just suck drafting early.
Yeah,
We just
so I think he gets a third round pick for Jimmy. I don't think
yeah.
anything lower than that is reasonable.
Keep Jimmy or trade him. He's gone. I'm pretty sure next year, unless like I think he's gone most likely, unless Jimmy Garoppolo. Do we make it into the playoffs? We go make it to the Super Bowl, and Jimmy Garoppolo is the reason we make it to the Super Bowl, and Jimmy Garoppolo is the reason we win the Super Bowl. It's not
You're
if we run
talking
the Super
about
Bowl.
you're talking about something that's just not going to happen. I
Yeah,
mean,
I know
so
exactly,
they're
but
going to trade
it's
him.
not gonna happen. It's not gonna
Okay,
happen.
they
But
can.
that's
I
the
mean,
only way.
no, I'm not even gonna go that far.
Only way.
I'll say this. I'll say this. Jimmy can win the Super Bowl. I'd actually prefer to trade him if he won the Super Bowl because guess what? You can actually get a first round pick maybe for him. That'd be
Yeah.
great. Like you gotta trade Jimmy. You got to. You can't not trade Jimmy. It would be insane. It would
Yeah.
be just insane.
We do not want him. I the thing is like as much as I just can't like live with having a $22 million quarterback sitting on the bench if he's on the bench next year. Like that's just who pays a bench backup quarterback $20 million? That just won't sit right with me. So like we trade Jimmy, do whatever you trade him, cut him, do whatever you want with Jimmy. Just make sure he's not in the Niners next year. I would prefer a trade, but like I said, the only way I see them possibly bringing him back is what I said. Like the only way I possibly see him bringing him back is if he wins the Super Bowl, if he takes us to the playoffs, and we go into we have a playoff run, and he's the reason we're doing it. He's the reason we're winning the playoffs. He's the reason we win the Super Bowl. It's not gonna happen,
It's
but
not
that's
gonna
the
happen.
only way I logically see them considering bringing him back. But I don't think he's coming back either way. Hey, it's my boy Josh. I don't know if you know Josh, but he's just a homie of
I
mine.
do.
Winning the Super Bowl with Jimmy is a good problem to have. It is.
It is a good problem to have, but
I mean,
man.
if we won the Super Bowl, I
Well,
think I would be more. If we
let's
won the
just
Super
not do this whole quarterback thing for
yeah,
another off season going into the season. Like, I just don't want to deal with this anymore. I mean, it's so annoying. Like, I'm just exhausted. Like I'm emotionally exhausted from dealing with this quarterback situation. I want no more of it. Please stop, John Lynch. Stop making us deal with this crap. Come on, man. This is ridiculous.
I mean, I think I'd be more happier if the Niners won this. If the Niners won the Super Bowl, let's say the Niners won the Super Bowl, I think I'd be more happier if they traded Jimmy for a couple of picks. If they traded Jimmy, I'd be more happy if they traded Jimmy than if we won the Super Bowl this year. Because like I'd be like, yes, he's gone. No more quarterback talk. Jimmy's not on the team anymore.
Oh no! I
Great
mean,
for the
you would
Lamar
be
Jackson.
happier if they won the Super Bowl,
He's just not on the
But
team.
yeah.
No, big play say no. But moving on to the next topic. This one is a little bit of a controversial one. I was gonna leave it for the end, but let's jump through some of the topics that I have and let's go to the last topic. It's not the last topic of the day, but it is the one that I was going to make the last topic of the day. But Elijah Mitchell versus Najee Harris. Who is the better running back?
Najee. I mean, I don't even. I mean, this isn't debatable to me. I think you look at what's happening with the Steelers' offensive line this season. Other than the Dolphins, I don't know who's worse. And then I mean, Big Ben, like, man, that offense is terrible. Like truly terrible. Elijah Mitchell is very good, but Najee is no question better. And if he was on the 49ers, I mean.
He
Oh
would.
my God. He would be well past Jonathan Taylor for
Yeah.
scrimmage yards right now, like
We
200
would.
yards past him.
Yeah.
And Debo wouldn't be hurt right now. Like, that's the difference between Najee Harris and Elijah Mitchell. Yeah, it's gonna be Yeah, Giants O-line might be worst.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. I mean, just put the Steelers, Giants, Dolphins
The
all in a
Steelers
bin
are up there.
together.
Steelers are up there.
Oh
Okay.
no, I think the Dolphins are by far the worst. Actually, I don't even think it's a race.
Let me tell you
It,
personally, the Dolphins are the worst. I don't watch Dolphins games. I went back and I had Miles Gaskin on my team. I traded up for him 1 week, and I had Miles Gaskin on my team. I was like, Miles Gaskin puts up 31 points in Tampa. He's a decent running back. I go and watch that game. The dude has like 5 carries and like 3 rushing yards. That's how bad. Like legit, he would get the ball, he would run for like 1 yard, he would get tackled. Like that's how bad the offensive line is. It is horrible. But yes,
yeah.
I'm taking.
So with Najee, getting back to Steelers, right? The Steelers are awful. That
Yeah, the
offense is
Steelers are awful
awful.
also.
He is their entire offense. He is the reason that they produce points. I mean, yeah, they have good receivers too, but Big Ben isn't exactly delivering them the ball. So if Najee was on the 49ers, like Debo would just not be hurt right now.
Yeah.
So no question, Najee Harris over Elijah Mitchell. I love
Yeah.
Najee Harris.
Yeah, I'm going Najee Harris. Najee Harris is a Niners fan. He was a Niners fan as a kid, so that obviously gives him
He's
some
from the
points.
Bay.
He's from the Bay, yes. But also Najee Harris, just like you said, like the offensive line of the Steelers is just horrible. And with
It's god
Elijah
awful.
Mitchell, he has a good offensive line with the Niners. It's a pretty solid, decent, good offensive line. It's not obviously the best offensive line in football, but it's up there. It's a top 10 offensive line. It's a good offensive line.
It's one of the better ones for
Yeah, it's
sure.
one of the better ones, right? So Elijah
And
Mitchell,
with Kyle's scheme, right? It's
yeah,
just like
yep.
it's
Not to
it's
mention
so
Kyle.
much open. Yeah.
Yep, but
And
yeah,
I just don't know. I guess my thing is like I don't know what success Elijah Mitchell would have with other teams. Like I think he's certainly very good, but it's like Raheem Mostert, right? They're both very, very, very good players, but they look the best with the 49ers because that's
yeah,
the scheme that fits them the best. So I think it's a perfect match of player and scheme with Elijah Mitchell. And with Najee, he's just too good of a player that, you can't not get him involved. So with the
mm-hmm.
Steelers, like even if he was on a decent offense, it would look so much better. And yeah, Steelers are so bad.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like I didn't get to finish the point, but yes, it's Najee because the offensive line for the Steelers was just horrible. And Elijah Mitchell, he's fast. He is faster in my opinion, and I think he's looking pretty good, especially for a 6th round pick. But hey, you got to give a little bit of credit to that offensive line. With Najee, with a horrible offensive line, he's still producing pretty darn good with a bad offensive line. Considering that he has a bad offensive line, he's still producing. So yeah, I'm taking Najee over Elijah Mitchell.
For sure.
Yep. Well, moving on to the next topic. Are the Seahawks still a tough matchup for the 49ers?
Yes. Because and you saw the way I said that. I don't know how much I really believe that, but I think the Seahawks are tough always for the 49ers. Just because I think going to Seattle is tough, first of all, playing in that kind of environment, but you saw them this like on Monday night. You've seen the games they've played in. They're not like ever out of games, right? I think the Seahawks are just losing games down the stretch. So this is a team that's always going to be frisky to me, that you always can't quite put in the dirt because they'll always be right there, right? I think they're that team that just stays in enough that you can't you just can't think of them as a throwaway matchup. So yeah, I think it's still a really tough matchup for the 49ers. It's a team that will stay in it till the end of the game. And if it's Russell Wilson versus Jimmy Garoppolo, I think I know who I'm betting on, even though Russ hasn't looked great recently. But, if Russell Wilson needs to put together a drive to beat the 49ers, they certainly can do so.
He did that in Washington. He did that in Washington, just couldn't convert on the 2-point conversion, and they almost had a chance to do it. Had a chance to go win again, score a field goal and win again if it wasn't for that penalty on the onside kick. But Seattle, obviously, Seattle's a tough matchup for the 49ers. Whatever the Niners, even in 2019, the Niners were a dominant football team. They were undefeated, and Seattle still gave them a tough fight. Whatever it is, Seattle for some reason always plays their best and plays well against the Niners. And we've seen that for the last couple of seasons. Even though the Niners, like I said, in 2019, undefeated, they'll still give the Niners a tough match, a tough fight, and they'll put up a tough fight against the Niners. So I still think it's a tough fight for the Niners. I get it. It's obviously the Seahawks are 3-8. But for whatever reason, you can't count Russell Wilson out. And the Steelers I keep saying the Steelers. The Seahawks for some reason always giving Niners a tough fight. And also, not to mention, like you said, it's in Seattle. It's loud in
Yep.
Seattle. The fans are rowdy. It's hard to play in Seattle. It's hard for any team to play in Seattle because it's just so loud. So it's definitely going to be a tough matchup for the 49ers. And I do think the game is going to be good, but I just hope the Niners can pull it out.
Yeah, and it's just going to be one of those close games, right? It's always close to Seattle. I don't feel like they're ever not in a close game this year.
Yeah. Will DK Metcalf have Josh says, will DK Metcalf have a big game? He hasn't got many targets in the last few weeks, but the 49ers have problems at corner. I mean,
I think Jimmy Ward and Mosley can deal with him enough to where, the type of production that he's been having where he doesn't get as many targets. I can definitely see that happening, especially with Seattle where they want to run the ball, right? They just signed Adrian Peterson for reasons because they need running backs. They just don't have as many. So I think DK Metcalf probably won't have a big game, but, if he does get matched up against a guy like Josh Norman over and over and over, and the 49ers ask Josh Norman to do that over and over and over, that becomes a problem. But I just don't think that happens in this game because of game flow. So I think it's still going to be struggles for DK Metcalf. Just, I could see him getting 3 or 4 catches versus us, but I just don't think he's going to have that crazy game versus the 49ers.
I don't think he's gonna have that game like he did last year in Seattle, where it would just rush to DK, rush to DK, rush to DK. I don't think it's gonna be that type of game. But I do think DK, like you said, I think DK will have 3, 4, 5 receptions, 5 targets. He'll get some targets, but I think DK will definitely have a better game than he did last week on Monday night. That I don't think he's gonna have that same dominant game that he had last year when we were playing in Seattle. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
agree.
well, that basically wraps up the show. I appreciate you for joining me, Ben. If you haven't
Of course.
already, go check out Ben's channel. The link is in the description. He does shows with Vinny.
Vinny, we're back tomorrow actually with Vinny. And then if you go over to my Twitter, you can read my latest All 49ers SI article all about the 49ers offense and how sustainable is this recent offensive success, because these last 3 games have been great. I mean, but can they do it down the stretch? That's kind of what I dove into. I hope everyone appreciates reading that. Go check it out.
Yep. Go check it out. SI.com, right? SI.com?
All 49ers SI. Yep. Go check it out.
So go check that out. Go subscribe to his
channel. It's on my Twitter as well.
All right. Then go subscribe to his channel. Go follow him on Twitter. Both the links are in the description for that. And go check out his article, All 49ers SI. If you're not subscribed to my channel, please go do so. I will be back later on tonight with Rob Shu at 7 o'clock. So make sure to tap in. We're talking about the Seahawks versus 49ers matchup, so make sure to tap in. I appreciate you for joining me. Me and Ben should be back next Wednesday.
We will.
Niners. Hope the Niners get a W against the Seahawks, and we'll see you guys next time. Go Niners.
Peace out.